Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 31st of January. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, it's a happy Brexit day. Yes, it has been 5 years to the day since the UK officially left the European Union. But what have our politicians actually done with their newfound freedoms?
With the illegal and legal migration levels soaring since the UK left the EU, the government has this week published its landmark Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill. Will it help Keir Starmer fulfil his pledge to smash the gangs? Well, critics say it will make the problem worse.
And as the search for answers continues following the tragic plane crash in Washington, D.C., investigators have now actually recovered the black boxes from the American Airlines plane. What will they show? Tom, you were one of the keenest proponents of Brexit in the country, I think. Certainly one of the youngest at the time, in the build-up to the vote, for sure. How do you feel about it all now?
It's interesting. I was looking back, because it's not just the 5 years since we actually left the European Union. It was 2015 when David Cameron unexpectedly won the general election. The country knew we were getting a referendum. It was in his manifesto. So really, from 2015, that's when I sort of got involved with what became the Vote Leave campaign. That's been 10 years now. That's been a decade since the country knew it was getting a referendum and that process went forward. There were moments in that 5 years between the referendum becoming a certainty and the UK actually leaving the European Union. There were moments when it looked like people would be made to vote again. There were moments when it looked like it would all be lost, when it could all be abandoned. I mean, thinking about it, I mean, that was 5 years. There were 3 different prime ministers. There were 2 general elections. And there was 1 referendum. I mean, it was a crazy time in our politics. But if anything, the topsy-turvy world we live in, the COVID pandemic and everything else that happened since we left the European Union has been just as crazed.
Yeah, but let's be frank. I think the vote has definitely been betrayed. I mean, if you voted for control of your borders, take back control of your borders. You haven't got it. If you voted for an improvement in living standards when it comes to economics and everything else, you haven't got it. And yes, there have been, global kerfuffles, not least the pandemic and the Ukraine war and everything like that. But our politicians, what has Brexit proven? It's proven that the calibre of our politicians here in the United Kingdom is not up to scratch.
Yeah, they can't blame Brussels anymore for their mistakes. But isn't it funny? On the 31st of January 2020, Britain left the European Union legally, but also the first 2 cases of COVID were diagnosed in the UK. And this is the most frustrating thing of the last 5 years, that for every economic metric there has been since Britain left the European Union, you've got one side saying that was all COVID, and the other side saying that was all Brexit. And if only it had happened a few years earlier, we'd be able to sort of
maybe things would be worse if we were still in the European Union. We'll never know. We'll never know,
we wouldn't have anything like an AI sector in this country because of the EU AI Act. That's just one of the 395,000 pages of regulations that the EU has passed since we left. It's all very well and good saying, you know, we haven't repealed enough EU law, and we definitely haven't. But my goodness me, we've avoided a lot more extra EU law that they've been busy legislating.
Yeah, things aren't exactly that great on the continent, are they, really? gbnews.com/You're Say. Please do get in touch, but it's your headlines first with Aaron Armstrong.
A very good afternoon to you. Our top stories. Police have now confirmed a woman's body has been recovered from the River Dee in Aberdeen, now where 2 sisters were last seen. Henrietta and Eliza Husti, who were triplets, moved to Scotland from Hungary. Well, they were last seen on January the 7th at 2 a.m. A huge search was launched amid fears for their safety. Police were alerted this morning to a body seen in the river that has since been recovered. 3 judges who oversaw court proceedings involving Sarah Sharif in the years before she was murdered can be named for the first time. Judges Alison Rayside, Peter Nathan and Sally Williams were all involved in family court hearings related to the 10-year-old between 2013 and 2019. The last of 3 sets of proceedings saw Sarah placed in the home of her father, Irfan Sharif, and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, who were jailed for life last year for her murder in 2023. The press was previously barred from reporting the names of the judges and other professionals involved in the case. Tests are being carried out on the black boxes recovered from the passenger plane which collided with a US Army helicopter yesterday, killing 67 people. Live pics here from the US Capitol. Officials there say they are going to try to salvage the wreckage of both aircraft today. Efforts to recover the bodies were paused overnight because of difficult conditions. 40 have been found, which leaves 27 people unaccounted for. Well, authorities have promised to issue a preliminary report within 30 days. However, an investigation by the New York Times claims the helicopter flew outside an approved flight path and there were staffing irregularities in air traffic control at Reagan National Airport, with one controller juggling 2 jobs, planes and helicopters, at the same time. However, President Trump, he's made his assessment. He's blamed diversity policies introduced under the Biden and Obama presidencies.
The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so.
Meanwhile, details about some of the 67 people who died in the crash are now beginning to emerge. At least 14 US and Russian figure skaters were on board the plane, including former world champions Yevgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov. The couple, who were coaches, were returning from the US Ice Skating Championships with a group of young skaters whom they were coaching. It included 12-year-old Olivia Terre and teenager Corey Haynos, who was on board with his parents. 3 hostages who are set to be released on Saturday as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal have been named by Hamas. They are Keith Siegel, Ofer Calderon and Yarden Bilbas. Now, Bilbas, who was taken alongside his wife and 2 young sons on October the 7th, 2023, the man in your picture now, is believed to be the only surviving member of the family. It follows the release of 8 hostages yesterday amid chaotic scenes in southern Gaza. 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals were free in total. In exchange, 110 Palestinians were later released from Israeli prisons, including 32 with life sentences and 30 minors. The UK is marking 5 years since it left the European Union, severing almost 5 decades of political ties, free movement and free trade. For supporters, the UK became a sovereign nation in charge of its own destiny. Opponents believe it has isolated the country and damaged the economy. Well, we'll be focusing on this issue throughout the day here on GB News and hearing from those who've been affected. Well, despite the economic impacts, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch remains positive.
Years ago, we had what was the greatest vote of confidence in our country. And as Brexit Secretary, I removed lots of EU regulations. I ended the of the European Court of Justice, but there's still a lot more to do, like a trade deal with the US. That's a Brexit opportunity that we need to take. We started those negotiations when President Trump was last in power. He is back again. The Biden administration didn't want it. I think Keir Starmer needs to look at that, look at where the opportunities are. That's where the growth is going to be.
And some of the world's biggest music stars have performed in Los Angeles for a benefit concert to help the area recover from the devastating wildfires earlier this month.
I'm high, but I'm grounded. I'm sane, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm lost, but I'm hopeful.
Alanis Morissette there, also performing on 2 separate venues. Rod Stewart, Green Day, Katy Perry, Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac and Sting, among others. Parts of LA, of course, were devastated last month by those wildfires. 25 people were killed. Local acts born in the area also performed. Billie Eilish, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and No Doubt. Proceeds to go to rebuilding communities and preventing fires in the future. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more just after 1:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes past 1. Today, a historic anniversary. It's now 5 years to the day since the UK left the European Union.
Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. For many people, this is an astonishing moment of hope, a moment they thought would never come.
That's what Boris Johnson said. GB News can reveal today that Britain has avoided more than 395,000 pages worth of EU regulations in the 5 years since leaving the bloc. That's quite incredible, with over 7,600 directives being imposed on member states in that same period.
So whilst it may seem that we haven't got rid of enough EU regulation, well, we've avoided an entire tranche of new stuff. However, people still divided on whether Brexit is responsible for the UK's sluggish economic growth and, of course, the increase in net migration in the years since our departure. The question is, have politicians used the freedoms that Brexit provided the government for good or for ill?
Well, let's go to Boston in Lincolnshire now, where over 75% of residents voted to leave the European Union. And we'll speak to GB News presenter Martin Daubney, who's spending the day there. Martin, what are people telling you on the ground then?
Well, as you said, it's the highest Brexit voting constituency in all of the land, 75%. And the feeling I'm getting today is one of absolute political betrayal. Those who voted to remain, very, very few of them, obviously unhappy. Those who voted to leave just feel that it never got properly enacted through political ineptitude and perhaps, actually, there being no will whatsoever to do it. And a huge, huge issue around here was uncontrolled immigration. A town of 70,000, but 20% of that is from Eastern Europe. And astonishingly, that number has increased since Brexit. 9% population boom versus a 6% nationwide average across England. It's getting worse and worse. And so today I've been speaking to locals and business people and politicians for their reaction. I've got 2 locals I'd like to bring in now. Pete Chamberlain, he's a retired water engineer, and Yvonne Stevens, a former Brexit Party councillor. Pete, I'm going to start with you. Something that's come up time and time again in the town today is the pressure of immigration upon local public services. People can't get the appointments they need. Tell us about your experiences locally.
Well, children wanting school places, you know, the choice of their school, they can't always get it because they're in front because of the, you know, the foreign influx. They've got to be taught the same as the rest of us, so they don't get the school places. You've got doctor's appointments, you can't get an appointment, and my grandson's actually waiting for an appointment. He rang up for one, and he couldn't make one. They was going to ring him back when he could have an appointment, and he's still waiting for that. So it's even gone a step back now, how you can book an appointment. The roads, they're all blocked up. If you go to a junction, you're 15th or 16th car back. Several traffic light changes, and you're still sat there, and all that sort of thing. I mean, I used to work on sewage treatment, and I know the sewage treatment works around here. They're all overloaded. Nothing's never been changed to make them work, so as we can deal with this population explosion.
And what about crime in the area? I've noticed in the area where we were filming earlier, a lot of people hanging around, Romanians, people obviously from overseas, openly kind of doing drugs on the street. In fact, GBNews managed to disperse them with our cameras quicker than the police did.
Well, you can all see where they are, or smell where they are, because they're always smoking this stuff around the corners and stuff. But at one stage, it doesn't seem to be as bad at the moment, but at one stage we was the murder capital in the country. By hundreds of thousands to one death, and we've had several murders in this town.
OK, let's bring in now Yvonne Stevens, a former Brexit Party councillor, and you said to me your father was a fisherman. Of course, sovereign control fishing waters was one of the huge Brexit promises that failed to materialise. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, I was you got that bit wrong. I wasn't Brexit Party. I was a Conservative Party.
All right, carry on.
But now I'm a reformer. I've joined Reform. Yes, my father was a fisherman. This lovely river, the River Haven, is where he used to fish. He would turn in his grave, I'm sure, at the way things have happened or not happened for the fishing. The fishing, we were supposed to have sovereign rights. We haven't got them. We're still in a mess. We've still got the IFCA. We've got Eastern IFCA in this area that oversees the fishing, like the old fishing officer, and IFCA was brought in during the time we were in the EU, and it was still working with EU rules.
All right, thanks, Dominic. Pete, quickly step in. A lot of people have been saying today about would you vote the same way again? Would you vote to leave the European Union? Would you vote for Brexit again, or have you changed your mind?
I certainly would vote again, more so.
More so. What about yourself?
Definitely. I campaign for the referendum every Saturday in the marketplace with a group of UKIPers.
All right.
And yes, I would definitely do it again.
Got to leave it there. Thank you, Pete and Yvonne. There we go. From the heart of Brexit land, they are still waiting for the moment where we finally Brexit. They want it more than ever. They just feel that the political class has completely and utterly abandoned them.
Well, thanks very much, Martin. We'll be back with you, of course, a bit later in the programme, and with your own Brexit special from 3 o'clock.
Absolutely. Now, Northern Ireland, arguably one of the most impacted by Brexit in terms of our four nations. Let's go to Stormont now and speak to our reporter, Doogie Beattie. Doogie, what's the verdict there, then?
Well, it's been terrible for Northern Ireland. In fact, all those thousands of regulations that you have avoided, we have had to pick up in Northern Ireland because, of course, the Tory party left us behind as part of that Brexit deal. Northern Ireland became the price for Brexit, and we are held inside the EU with absolutely no political representation in Brussels. And this British citizens here have to take whatever regulations are thrown at them by the EU. We've had a customs border put in the Irish Sea, breaking us away from our largest markets. And we have watched the prices rise on our supermarket shelves, and we have watched absolutely no employment due to the protocol. If you remember, Rishi Sunak came to the Coca-Cola factory in Lisburn in County Antrim and had such a marvellous press conference telling us all that we were going to get the best of both worlds. Well, it very much turned out we got the worst of both worlds, and the Parliament buildings behind us here has to follow regulations from the EU, of which it has no political representation in. And the grace periods in Northern Ireland, which let us have goods from Great Britain, are still in place until March, and the MLAs here on the nationalist side of the chamber, along with the Alliance Party, decided to vote before Christmas to stay inside that agreement for another 4 years before the grace periods have gone. So it is causing real problems in Ireland, and the amazing thing for me is that the politicians behind decided to vote away their ability to rule. And that is really democracy going, well, clean mad. But the manufacturing side, farming side, we have looked at this morning. And earlier on, I spoke to Ashley Pickett. He is the managing director of one of Britain's largest independent generator manufacturers, and he told me the problems that he was having.
Northern Ireland has not seen Brexit. In the manufacturing sector, we're part of the EU. We are subject to EU duties, and we have a situation today where there's a border across the Irish Sea. Our products that come in from United Kingdom are subject to EU duties. We have a full customs border, and that involves paperwork, and it involves cost in every single shipment. To try and mitigate some of the costs, if we have a customs declaration to make, it's better to pay that price for a larger number of components as opposed to a smaller number of components. The unfortunate problem will be in March we will have business-to-business parcels being subject to the same full customs treatment, and that will make a lot of things completely unviable to undertake and manufacture in Northern Ireland.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed, Doogie Beattie, for bringing us that report from Northern Ireland. Now, back here, meanwhile, the government has been quite busy. It's published its Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill designed to smash the gangs and clamp down on illegal migration.
Well, let's get an overview now with GB News presenter Matt Goodwin, because, Matt, 5 years since Britain left the European Union, and one of the biggest expectations, I think, from so many people was a greater control over migration, and yet legal and illegal, I mean, it's not been a pretty picture.
No, that's true. I mean, the good news is we do have control over immigration policy in a way that EU member states do not. We could, if we wanted, elect a different government at the next election and have a radically different immigration policy. But as we've seen with the borders, we are still locked into things like the European Convention on Human Rights. We're still locked into things like Tony Blair's Human Rights Act. We still have, if you like, the legislative framework that prevents us from genuinely controlling our borders and deporting foreign national offenders. So what Labour are trying to do now with this new bill is demonstrate that they can finally do what nobody else has done, which is stop the small boats and the sort of invasion on the border. But they can't do that because the detail of this bill, I mean, they're going to try and disrupt the gangs. Smashing the gangs, as we know, won't deal with the underlying issue of demand. They're saying they're going to use counter-terrorism powers to do that. But what they're crucially going to do, Tom, and I know you're on top of this detail as well, is they're basically going to decriminalise illegal migration. They're going to overturn many of the key parts of Rishi Sunak's illegal migration bill, essentially incentivising more people to come.
This is the fascinating thing, because I don't know if they've done this on purpose or if this has been accidental, but the Illegal Migration Act, which passed in 2023, it had all of these different elements within it. So, for the first time, no illegal migrant could get citizenship if they came illegally. People, if they claimed to be children on the border, if they claimed to be under the age of 18, they'd actually be tested for that before they got, put in the school system. I mean, we've seen some bizarre cases of people who look more like they're 30 years old being placed in schools. And also this obligation that was placed on government in 2023 for the first time to remove illegal migrants either to their own country or a safe third country, which became the Rwanda scheme. All of those parts have now been removed, meaning now there's going to be a pathway to citizenship once more for illegal migrants. I mean, do you think this is deliberate or just a complete oversight from the government?
Yeah, I don't personally think Labour really wants to stop and deal with this crisis. And it's not only removing the illegal migration bill and parts of that. Also, remember, Tom and Emily, we've removed Rwanda. We've removed the active deterrent. We're still spending £3,000 a day on goods for illegal migrants coming in, clothes and so on, £5.4 billion a year. By the time of the next general election, we'll have spent somewhere around £60 billion dealing with this ongoing crisis. So there are more incentives for people to come over than there are disincentives. And that is fundamentally the problem at the heart of this crisis. I genuinely think, 5 years on from Brexit and so on, this is the really big problem in British politics. It is at the heart of everything. We still are not in control of our own borders, and that will generate seismic change in 2029.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is deliberate. I mean, to cast your mind back to the debate over the Illegal Migration Act, the Tories won, and people were saying, talking about the morals and the ethics of it, and how if you arrive in this country, you should be able to claim asylum, whatever means you get here. It was quite controversial that the Conservatives said, well, hang on, if you arrive by boat, you are an illegal migrant, even if you want to claim asylum. But the Boris wave of immigration...
Unbelievable.
This is what I can't get over. This is what I can't get over. A man who promised to the electorate of this country that we are going to control the borders. He swapped mass EU immigration for mass immigration from everywhere else.
Yeah.
At the touch of a button, just without any conversation about it.
Well, the stats are absolutely mind-boggling. Here's just a couple. 86% of all immigration into Britain today is coming from outside of Europe. So it's not only that we're going to have another 10 million people coming in between now and 2047, which is what we saw this week with the Office for National Statistics. Most of those, almost all of those 10 million people will come from outside of Europe, from Africa, the Middle East and so on. More culturally different nations, shall we say, different values, different ways of life. It's also the influx of the relatives of workers. Now, what Boris said is we're going to have a points-based policy, the best of the best. What we have got since Brexit is the opposite. Just one stat to consider for viewers at home, because this will, I think, make them fall off their chairs. In the last half of 2024, take health and social care, because we're always told we need migration for health and social care. We gave 15,000 visas to workers in the health and social care system, 15,000. We gave 60,000 visas to their relatives. 60,000. This is how insane our immigration policy has become.
One social care worker that came over, they were bringing 4 family members.
So what we are doing, this is why, Tom, this is why mass immigration of the kind that we now have is making us poorer, not richer. This is the economic case for mass immigration is falling apart.
And it's not an on-off switch. It's often irreversible. They treat it as if it's, the economy needs a bit more of this, we'll just pull that lever.
But I'm so pleased in the way that we're discussing it, because politicians did pull the lever.
Yeah.
And so often I think we sit around tables like this and people say, the politicians lost control.
Yeah.
We don't control our migration. No, we do.
We do.
This was a positive decision that politicians made.
We do.
Perhaps they didn't think about the follow-on from that decision.
And just very briefly, we're talking a lot about Britain, but remember, 5 years on, what does the EU look like? And one of the things that is very clear from Germany to Austria, from France to Sweden, is that the mood music in Europe 5 years on from Brexit has become more Brexit in orientation, more critical of mass immigration, more determined to control their borders, no longer upholding Schengen. Now, we don't hear a lot about that among Remainers and rejoiners in Britain, but the EU is not a place that most Brits would look at and think, that's working well, I'd quite like to rejoin that, thank you very much. It is in chaos, economically, culturally, and of course, more than anything, demographically.
Yeah, and a lot of parties desperately trying to regain control of their own borders. Very interesting indeed, isn't it? Matt Goodwin, thank you very much indeed. This is Good Afternoon Britain. On GB News still to come, we're going to be bringing you the latest on the search for answers following the tragic plane crash in Washington. Investigators have now discovered the aircraft's black boxes.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Well, specialist from Woolly and Wallace Auction House, Alexandra Aguilar, joins me now. Alexandra, how lovely to see you. And I wonder whether you're going to bring the jewellery in. You're actually wearing
I am.
the jewellery. So shall we begin with the bracelet?
Right, so it's a diamond line bracelet, as you can see. It's really a beautiful thing. It's made of 27 diamonds with a yellow tint, and they are mounted on yellow gold, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful piece. But there's more to it, and as you mentioned, it's the provenance. It comes from the collection of Elizabeth Taylor, really one of the queens of Hollywood, and it was given to her by Michael Jackson.
Have you any idea why Michael Jackson gave her such a magnificent gift?
They were very, very good friends. They were friends for over 20 years, and he knew her love for diamonds, for jewelry, and we know that they exchanged many presents, including this fantastic bracelet.
Would that have been made new at that time?
Yes, I believe so.
We're talking, what, about the 1970s or something like that?
Oh, maybe a little bit later.
Later, 80s?
Yes, that's right. But what's particularly interesting about this one is all the 27 diamonds have the same colour. And it's very difficult to find stones with the same colour, with the same yellow tint. So it makes it particularly beautiful and particularly special.
Why do you think it will go for about £70,000?
It's... well, it is a beautiful piece. It's very wearable, as you can see, and there is the provenance is amazing. Jewelry from the collection of Elizabeth Taylor is very sought after, of course.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. It's 1:29. Now, the US President Donald Trump has sparked controversy after blaming a diversity hiring push for the deadly mid-air collision that killed 67 people in Washington. OK, I don't think that's actually fair, what I just read there.
OK.
I don't think he blamed the diversity hiring push.
Because you watched the whole press conference.
I watched the whole press conference. I don't think he said that. He was talking about how the push for diversity hiring could have led to a possibly lower calibre of people working in air control. He did say many times that he didn't know if that was the reason for this particular crash.
Right. You can see...
And the idea that he was blaming dwarfs, I mean, he was not blaming dwarfs.
You can see, though, how...
yeah, I can see how it gets...
talking about the generality of the... I don't know, adequacy of air traffic controllers in a press conference specifically to do with one crash. It's easy to see how people have taken that for talk about that crash.
Yeah, true. He did go from the heartfelt bit at the start to then a very long bit about diversity and inclusion hiring, which felt a little bit out of whack. Anyway, should we get some more with the travel and aviation expert, Sally Gethin? Sally, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So what's the latest? We're hearing now that we have the black box from the American Airlines flight.
Yeah, so the 2 black boxes from the American Airlines flight, the data recorder and the voice recorder. And also I'm hearing that a recording device on the helicopter has been salvaged as well. So this is still very early stages, but they'll be keen to get their hands on those and unpack them right away. The way it works with these investigations, it's all laid down by a UN agency called ICAO, is that the first 30 days, a preliminary data is gathered and a preliminary report is issued. And then about a year later, or maybe longer than that, then the full report is revealed. But it's a huge, exhaustive process, and absolutely every factor will be taken into consideration.
This is, of course, such a focal point of international attention. Will there actually be anything on the black boxes themselves that would tell us anything? If as many people are now suspecting, this is actually an issue to do with air traffic control rather than any pilot error?
Well, it will reveal, for example, the voice communications with the control tower. That in itself will provide evidence. It'll also look at all the data that's being gathered in the cockpit, or the avionics, as we call it, on the flight deck of each aircraft, and build a much more comprehensive picture. At the moment, there's a lot of jumping to conclusions, let's be honest. They may prove to be correct, but the two avenues now are going towards the control tower and what happened there, and was there perhaps a miscommunication or a misunderstanding? And so there's been that aspect looked at particularly, and the other aspect is looking at, what was going on with the helicopter. A lot of talk today about whether those pilots on the helicopter were wearing night vision goggles. Was that appropriate for them to get visual situational awareness? But, there could be other factors at play, possibly something wrong, if you like, with the helicopter, for example, that might put those pilots at a disadvantage. But the thing is that helicopter should not have been at that altitude. It was definitely unsafe, and put it in the danger zone with the commercial flight.
Really, really clear that something definitely went wrong. We don't know who's to blame, if any individual is to blame at all, but clearly the height of that helicopter was, well, above where it should have been. Sally Gethin, thanks so much for joining us, aviation expert, of course.
Yes, in the last few minutes, the US President Donald Trump has said the very same. He said the military helicopter involved in the crash was flying too high at the time of the accident that killed 67 people. So this clearly is what the experts must be telling him. The authorities must be telling him that this helicopter was flying, well, higher than it should have done, and that this collision could have been prevented had it not been. And this is all on his Truth social media account.
Yeah, it's fascinating to be back in the Trump era, because ordinarily, when there's a US president who's been briefed something, they might keep it to themselves. They might tell their cabinet. It might leak out in a day or two. Trump just goes on his phone immediately and tells the world.
He does. He said
we get a live feed into the brain of the US president again. It's interesting to readjust to this reality.
Yeah, he said it was far above the 200-foot limit. And he says that's not really too complicated to understand, is it? Three question marks.
Blimey.
So there you go. Very angry.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come on today's show, including reaction to the 5th anniversary of Britain's exit from the European Union. Have the politicians used the controls that you gave them with any sense at all? First, though, here are the news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good afternoon to you. Our top stories. A woman's body has been found near where two missing sisters were last seen in Aberdeen. Henrietta and Eliza Hushti from a set of triplets were last spotted near the River Dee in Aberdeen at 2 a.m. on January the 7th. Police Scotland says while the body hasn't been formally identified, Henrietta's family have been informed and the search for Eliza continues. They also added there are no apparent suspicious circumstances. The disappearance of the sisters, who are originally from Hungary, led to a huge missing persons search earlier this month. 3 judges who oversaw court proceedings involving Sarah Sharif in the years before she was murdered can be named for the first time. Judges Alison Rayside, Peter Nathan and Sally Williams were involved in family court hearings related to the 10-year-old between 2013 and 2019. The last of 3 sets of proceedings saw Sarah placed in the care of her father, Irfan Sharif, and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, who were jailed for life last year for her murder in 2023. Efforts to recover the bodies of those who died in yesterday's air crash near Washington, D.C. are set to resume after being paused overnight because of difficult conditions. These live pictures from the US Capitol now. 40 bodies have been found so far, which leaves 27 unaccounted for. Tests are being carried out on the black boxes recovered from the passenger plane, as you've been hearing, following that collision with the US Army helicopter yesterday. Officials in Washington say they're going to attempt to salvage the wreckage of both aircraft later today. Well, authorities have promised to issue a preliminary report within 30 days, but an investigation by the New York Times claims the helicopter flew outside an approved flight path and there were staffing irregularities in air traffic control at Reagan Airport, with one controller juggling 2 jobs planes and helicopters at the same time. Meanwhile, details about some of the victims have emerged. At least 14 US and Russian figure skaters were on board, including former world champions Yevgenia Shishkova and Vadim Nomov. The couple, who were coaches, were returning from the US Ice Skating Championships with a group of young skaters that included the 12-year-old Olivia Terre and teenager Corey Haynos, who was on board the plane with his parents. Finally, if you are thinking about stocking up your wine cellar, then you better get on with it, because prices rise tomorrow. Alcohol tax itself will rise in line with the retail price index at 3.6%, but a new tax on wines and spirits based on strength comes in at the same time. It means the duty on a bottle of gin will rise by 32 pence, while wine at 14.5 ABV will increase by 54 pence. However, in some relief to drinkers, duty on pints pulled in pubs will be cut by 1.7%. That means a massive saving of a penny per pint. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll be back with more just after 2 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We'll see rain easing across the southeast this morning, leaving a largely cloudy day for most, though it should start to brighten up across the west. Where we see the thickest cloud, that's where we see this frontal feature just draped across the country, but behind this a ridge of high pressure, bringing in largely settled and dry conditions. So a damp start across the southeast, as I say, though rain largely easing, and it leaves a mostly cloudy day across much of the country, and we could still see some drizzly patches, mainly around hilly areas, but sunshine breaking through nicely across southern parts of Wales, Devon and Cornwall, also across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, where we'll see the best of the brightness, and temperatures around about average for this time of the year. To finish off the day then, across Scotland, we'll see a mix, still plenty of cloud around, still some drizzly spots around hilly areas, but some clearer spells out to the southwest. Starting to turn rather breezy here, though, as we head into this evening. Similar across Northern Ireland, plenty of clear spells, so turning chilly as we head into the evening, but starting to turn rather breezy across the west. Chilly once again across Wales and parts of the southwest, where we see the clearest skies, but across central and southeastern parts, that cloud sticks around through much of the evening and into the overnight period, so it could turn rather murky by the morning, perhaps even seeing some patchy fog. But once again, where we see those clear spells, turning frosty here, so a chilly start as we start the weekend. A change on its way though across the southwest, clouds spilling in here, perhaps even seeing some drizzle across western parts of Scotland by the morning. So temperatures just dipping just below zero, where we see the clearest skies in the west, and this area once again through the central slice of the UK is where we're going to see the best of the brightness, but once again quite a grey and murky day across parts of the southeast, and winds picking up nicely across western parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland too, likely seeing cloudy conditions here, also with some rain and drizzle. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Perth and Kinross, the A989 is closed in both directions along Tay Street in Perth because of flooding. In County Down, the A51 remains closed each way along Tandragee Road in Guildford after a tree fell across the road in the storms last Friday. On the M6 in Lancashire, there's a lane closed northbound after an accident between junctions 32 and 33 from the M55 Broughton interchange to the A6 south of Lancaster, causing queues. In Greater Manchester, the A34 is closed each way along Birchfields Road at Longsight after an accident. In West Yorkshire, Sprockhovel Way is closed between the A638 and North Elmshall and Hemsworth after a car overturned. In Gloucestershire, the A466 remains closed each way at Llandogo after the storms, and Gatwick Express train services remain suspended between Gatwick Airport and Brighton after a landslip.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
OK, it's 1:41. Now, of course, it is 5 years since our official exit from the European Union, and we're now joined by the former UKIP leader, Neil Hamilton. Neil, thank you very much indeed. A big day for you, having been the UKIP leader. How do you think it's gone? Do you think our leaders have done the right thing when it came to delivering what they promised?
Well, because they haven't delivered at all. That's the great tragedy of Brexit. Brexit wasn't an event, it was a process, it was an opportunity. Having taken back the power to make our laws for ourselves and change them as we think fit in our own interests, and also to take control of the way the judges interpret those laws. Spineless governments that we've had since 2016, when we had the referendum, have done next to nothing to take advantage of the massive opportunities that Brexit provides. All right, we've managed to negotiate a few free trade deals with some countries around the world, and in particular with the Pacific countries, and gives us the opportunity now to have a free trade deal with the United States, which we wouldn't have been able to do if we were still inside the EU. But on the massive amount of unnecessary and costly regulation that we've inherited from the EU over the years, we've done nothing. Northern Ireland remains formally effectively part of the EU, although it doesn't have a voice in any of the decisions by which their legislation are made. And now we've got a government that is in favour of dynamic alignment. They're going to change our laws to conform with EU laws in order to get into the single market by the back door. So no, I'm afraid we've not taken advantage of the huge opportunities of Brexit at all. It's like having a car that's idling in the car park rather than putting your foot down on the accelerator and going out on the motorway of life.
Neil, can I search for a scintilla of positivity from you? You, of course, were a Member of Parliament in the 90s over those Maastricht debates. Did you at that time and your colleagues, when the Conservative Party was imploding over John Major's approach to a federal European Union, ever imagine that not even sort of stopping the Maastricht Treaty, the UK would actually ever leave the European Union? It must have seemed a pipe dream in the 1990s.
Well, I thought it was a pipe dream because I never thought that the British people would be given the opportunity to make that decision. And even if they were given that opportunity, they'd be intimidated by some kind of Project Fear into voting to stay in. I'm delighted that my fears weren't realised at the end of the day. When I was in the government, I did my best to stop the government signing the Maastricht Treaty. I was one of the group of ministers that provided a sort of internal resistance to the whole thing. And when I was a minister, I was actually a member of the European Union Council of Ministers, and I did my best to block or delay everything that was against our interest and cut off the money if we couldn't do that. So, you know, this is something that I've been involved in all my life. I joined the Anti-Common Market League in 1967, 6 years before we went into the EU. And so I'm desperately disappointed that we've not grasped Brexit by the hand and dragged Britain into the real world more effectively than we've been able to. But you know, we've had a government that's stuffed full of Remainers under Rishi Sunak. Remember him? Where's he gone? I haven't heard of him since he lost the leadership. The Windsor framework was an absolute disaster, completely kowtowing to Ursula von der Leyen. Now we've got Starmer, which is far worse. But if the Tory party wants to revive, one of the things they could do to help themselves is to provide us with a radical programme of detaching ourselves from that huge burden of EU regulation and legislation that's been holding back British business. And so the British economy is utterly stagnating, just like the economy in Europe.
OK, well, Neil Hamilton, thank you very much indeed, former UKIP leader. Great to get your assessment of where we stand, even if it's a rather depressing one. Now, we did only leave the EU, not Europe. You can still travel to Europe for some winter sun. So here's a forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Often breezy across the Canary Islands and heavy showers in Tunisia and Algeria, but elsewhere it is going to be largely settled, particularly across Greece and Italy. Plenty of sunny spells here, but as we move our way westwards towards the Mediterranean, this is where we're going to find the heavy showers. These could be thundery at times. And then out to the west, high pressure largely dominating, but it is going to bring some strong winds at times across Madeira and also Tenerife, where the best of the temperatures are, and elsewhere it is going to be largely settled into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Well, looks like Tenerife's the only place to go to that has any sun at all this week. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's programme. Indeed, after the break, we'll be discussing a legal challenge tabled against the government regarding children receiving gender-altering hormones. That next.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
We've got the Daily Mail now with the latest in the court case over whether a man is a woman or a man. It's a tough question. And J.K. Rowling has given her opinion. I think I can guess what it is, Cressida.
Explosive twist in Australia's What is a Woman trans battle as Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling gets involved. So this is the court case Giggle versus Tickle. Tickle was a...
He's Mr. Men.
That's right. It's a Mr. Men trans battle.
Kind of is a Mr. Man.
It was a women's group, wasn't it? Giggles... Oh, I get it wrong. Giggles for girls. And Roxy Tickle, who is a trans woman, wanted to join this group and wasn't allowed, was banned for being a biological male, and then sued and amazingly got $10,000 for this, which is already extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
But it's now doubling down and is going to file a cross appeal seeking to upgrade the judgment.
Yeah.
So Roxy has come back for another bite of the cherry.
And I've had a look at this Roxanne Tickle, the trans woman.
Pretty?
No, not one of the pretty ones. Not a Blair White. Just looks like, to be honest, it looks like
you could be sued for $10,000.
Looks like one of us.
Yeah.
To be honest, no. Like I mean, I'll happily.
For yourself.
No, I think it's an absolute. It's a farce, and it's making a mockery of It's not just making a mockery of women's right to have their own spaces. It's making a mockery of genuine trans people who actually put some effort in and look like a woman.
What do you mean a genuine trans
And also,
people?
if
We don't believe in that.
If your name was Roxanne, if you were going to transition, you wouldn't pick the name Roxanne Tickle.
What?
You choose Tess.
You Tess. That's a kind of name. No, the truth is that's one of the problems, is you get a choice in the name you're going to choose. And of course, you're going to choose like a hot Roxanne. That's a hot Roxanne. That's a great name. They're not going to choose.
You don't think
Louis.
Tess would work better with Tickle?
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 2 now, and a legal challenge has been posed against the government regarding children receiving gender-altering hormones.
Yes, Kira Bell took the NHS to court in 2020, claiming the institution gave her experimental gender treatment as a teenager.
Well, the case follows a fairly recent ban on puberty blockers following the Cass report.
OK, well, joining us now to discuss this is human rights lawyer Paul Conway, who is Kira's solicitor. Paul, tell us what's behind this, then.
Well, there's a concern that what we do know from the Cass report and from other international evidence that cross-sex hormones is what they're called. They're meant to masculinise the female body and the opposite for the male body, that these have a very poor evidence base, have huge life-altering consequences for children, and are taken by children at a vulnerable stage in their life without adequate safeguards. And with that background, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, had that evidence, and yet he chose not to ban the prescribing of these drugs, and yet he did choose to ban puberty blockers, which are less harmful. And so what this does, it leaves open, as it were, a very dangerous doorway for vulnerable children to access life-altering medication.
do correct me if I'm wrong, but is it not the case that it is illegal to give cross-sex hormones to people under the age of 16 in the United Kingdom? And the reason why puberty blockers were prescribed was so that children could reach an older age before they got cross-sex hormones. Is it not banned for people under the age of 16?
No, it's the strong recommendation from the NHS is that these drugs should not be taken under the age of 16 because they say that there is inadequate evidence to show that they are safe. Now, we agree with that they are not safe, okay, that evidence is there. We disagree with the NHS that it appears that they're saying that there is evidence to show that this is safe over 16 years old. And so we're keen to know in this proposed litigation what evidence they're relying on to say that cross-sex hormones are safe for 16 and 17.
Yeah, it does seem odd to ban the puberty blockers, but then to forget about the cross-sex hormones. Paul, just tell us a little bit about Kira Bell's story then. Wanted to make the transition from female to male, am I right?
Yeah, she had some profound challenges in her background. She had a disturbed upbringing, and she cottoned onto the idea that she was probably born in the wrong body, and so she needed to take the medication, puberty blockers, and cross-sex hormones and eventually a double mastectomy to become a boy. And so she embarked on that process under the care of the Tavistock, the Gender Identity Development Service there, when she was 15 years old, eventually having a double mastectomy, and then, as it were, realizing in her early 20s that the real issues that were going on in her life were never properly explored. She was simply affirmed in her belief that she was born in the wrong body.
And this is the real problem that we're seeing a lot with an affirmative approach to anyone who comes to a medical practitioner to say, yes, you're absolutely right, rather than offering any sort of other challenge or whatever, and a more rigorous process. Paul, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks so much for coming on and explaining your case. Paul Confrane, Kira's solicitor.
Yeah, do look up the case of Kira Bell. She's made a lot of noise, and it's very interesting to hear. A government spokesperson said, we continue to work with NHS England to implement the full recommendations from Dr Cass's review. We welcome the additional safeguards that NHS England is putting in place, as recommended by Dr Cass, to oversee the use of cross-sex hormones, including strengthened oversight from national clinicians.
Well, that's what the government says. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more coming up on today's programme. Don't move a muscle. But first, it's the weather with Honor Krizik.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We'll see rain easing across the southeast this morning, leaving a largely cloudy day for most, though it should start to brighten up across the west. Where we see the thickest cloud, that's where we see this frontal feature just draped across the country, but behind this a ridge of high pressure, bringing in largely settled and dry conditions. So a damp start across the southeast, as I say, though, rain largely easing, and it leaves a mostly cloudy day across much of the country, and we could still see some drizzly patches, mainly around hilly areas, but sunshine breaking through nicely across southern parts of Wales, Devon and Cornwall, also across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, where we'll see the best of the brightness, and temperatures around about average for this time of the year. To finish off the day then, across Scotland, we'll see a mix, still plenty of cloud around, still some drizzly spots around hilly areas, but some clearer spells out to the southwest. Starting to turn rather breezy here, though, as we head into this evening. Similar across Northern Ireland, plenty of clear spells, so turning chilly as we head into the evening, but starting to turn rather breezy across the west. Chilly once again across Wales and parts of the southwest, where we see the clearest skies, but across central and southeastern parts, that cloud sticks around through much of the evening and into the overnight period, so it could turn rather murky by the morning, perhaps even seeing some patchy fog. But once again, where we see those clear spells, turning frosty here, so a chilly start as we start the weekend. A change on its way, though, across the southwest, clouds spilling in here, perhaps even seeing some drizzle across western parts of Scotland by the morning. So temperatures just dipping just below zero, where we see the clearest skies in the west, and this area once again through the central slice of the UK is where we're going to see the best of the brightness, but once again quite a grey and murky day across parts of the southeast, and winds picking up nicely across western parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland too. Likely seeing cloudy conditions here, also with some rain and drizzle. Bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 31st of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
And happy Brexit Day. Yes, it's 5 years to the day since the UK officially left the European Union. But what have our politicians actually done with their newfound freedoms?
Yes, with illegal and legal migration soaring since the UK left the European Union, the government has this week published its landmark border bill. But will it help Keir Starmer fulfil his pledge to smash the gangs? Well, critics say it will make the problem worse.
And the search for answers continues following the tragic plane crash in Washington, D.C. Investigators have recovered the black boxes from the American Airlines plane. Well, it's a special anniversary today. No, I'm not talking about Brexit. I'm talking about my granny's birthday. Happy birthday, Granny.
Happy birthday. Thank you for watching. I hear you watch every day, on most days.
Yeah,
or is that just what she tells you?
No, I know she does. I know she does. But it's not just my grandmother's birthday today. It's also 5 years to the day since Britain left the European Union.
I want to know what she makes of Brexit now.
think she's a fan.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But I think lots of people who are a fan of the idea of Brexit also can point to the failures that various governments have had when it comes to taking up the opportunity. I mean, the politicians have so many more levers in front of them that they can pull, should they so choose. But a lot of them have been fairly timid about pulling those levers.
Yeah, the only one that they've not been timid about pulling is the immigration one.
Yes.
Absolutely not timid about that one.
It's true. It's interesting. EU migration has gone down ever so slightly, but then non-EU migration has soared through the roof. Now, that's under the control of politicians. They could have it higher, they could have it lower. They've chosen, for whatever reason, and my goodness me, there are lots of reasons, that they have said over the years to have it higher.
Do you believe when people say, oh, Brexit, if it weren't for Brexit, we'd be 40 billion richer, or if it weren't for Brexit, our GDP would be X amount bigger? I mean, how do they come up with that? There are so many variables.
There's a really easy solution to look at. You can look at the growth rate of Western European countries with a similar sort of size of economy to Britain. Look at Germany, look at France, look at Italy. Have they grown faster than Britain since Britain left the European Union?
No.
Have they magically avoided the energy crisis? Did they magically avoid COVID? I mean, even if you include all of the difficulties and the international concerns that have hit all of these countries, whether it's the war in Ukraine, the energy price rise, and indeed COVID, I mean, even including all of those, and goodness knows we've fumbled our way through all of these crises, Germany has grown at a slower rate than the United Kingdom. It spent most of the last 2 years in recession. The idea that Britain would alone be the only large European country to have had, 6% growth had we not left the European... I mean, it's clearly fantasy.
That's what some people seem to think, though. GBNews.com/your say. Get your thoughts in on this 5-year anniversary of us finally Brexiting. Of course, it's been a lot longer since we actually voted for Brexit as a country. But let us know, GBNews.com/your say. But it's the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hi there, good afternoon. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. A woman's body has been found near where 2 missing sisters were last seen in Aberdeen. Henrietta and Eliza Hushti from a set of triplets were last spotted near the River Dee in Aberdeen on January the 7th around 2 a.m. Police Scotland says while the body hasn't been formally identified, Henrietta's family have been informed and the search for Eliza continues. They added there are no apparent suspicious circumstances. The disappearance of the sisters, who were originally from Hungary, led to a huge missing persons search earlier this month. 3 judges who oversaw court proceedings involving Sarah Sharif in the years before she was murdered can be named for the first time. Judges Alison Rayside, Peter Nathan and Sally Williams were all involved in family court hearings related to the 10-year-old between 2013 and 2019. Now, the last set of 3 proceedings saw Sarah placed in the care of her father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul. They were jailed for life last year for her murder in 2023. Tests are being carried out on the black boxes recovered from the passenger plane which collided with a US Army helicopter yesterday, killing 67 people. Live pictures here from Washington, D.C. for those of you watching on TV. Officials in the US capital say they're going to attempt to salvage the wreckage of both aircraft today. Efforts to recover the bodies were paused overnight because of difficult conditions, but they have now resumed. 40 bodies have been found, 27 are still unaccounted for. Authorities have promised to issue a preliminary report within 30 days, but a New York Times investigation claims the helicopter flew outside an approved flight path and there were staffing irregularities in air traffic control at Reagan National Airport, with the controller juggling 2 jobs, planes and helicopters, at the same time. President Trump has pointed the finger of blame in a number of directions. The Black Hawk helicopter was, in his words, flying too high by a lot. And he's also blamed diversity policies introduced under the Biden and Obama presidencies.
FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel? I don't think so.
Well, details about some of the 67 people who died are beginning to emerge. At least 14 US and Russian figure skaters were on board the passenger plane, including former world champions Yevgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov. The couple, who were coaches, were returning from the US Ice Skating Championships with a group of young skaters that included the 12-year-old Olivia Terre and teenager Corey Haynos, who was on board with his parents. The government's pledged to invest an extra £100 million of funding for neighbourhood policing in England and Wales. That's in addition to £100 million announced in December in an effort to put 13,000 more police officers on the streets by 2029. That is one of the government's central pledges. Well, the investment is scheduled for the next financial year. Each police force will set out plans to use that funding to increase patrols by the early spring. 3 hostages set to be released on Saturday as part of the Gaza ceasefire deal have been named by Hamas. The hostages are the Israelis Keith Segal, Ofer Calderon and Yarden Bilbas. Bilbas, who was taken alongside his wife and 2 young sons on October the 7th, 2023, is believed to be the only surviving member of the family. It follows the release of 8 hostages yesterday amid chaotic scenes in southern Gaza. That included 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals. In exchange, 110 Palestinians were released from Israeli prisons, including 30 minors and 32 people with life sentences. And some of the world's biggest music stars have been performing in Los Angeles for a benefit concert to help the area recover from devastating wildfires earlier this month.
I'm high, but I'm grounded. I'm sane, but I'm overwhelmed. I'm lost, but I'm hopeful.
Well, that's Alanis Morissette. Also involved in the 2 separate concerts at 2 venues, Rod Stewart, Green Day, Stevie Nicks and Sting. All of it trying to raise money for LA, parts of which were devastated last month by those fires. 25 people were killed. Proceeds going towards rebuilding communities in the area. That's it for the moment. I'll be back with more just after 2:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2, and today marks a special milestone. It's now 5 years to the day since the UK officially left the European Union.
Tonight, we are leaving the European Union. For many people, this is an astonishing moment of hope, a moment they thought would never come.
Well, there you go. And a lot's happened since, but have the right things happened? And what do our politicians today have to say about this moment in time, this anniversary? Joining us in the studio is our political editor, Christopher Hope, to tell us more. Christopher, you've been out and about hearing what our politicians have to say about this. And what are they saying?
Well, not much from the Prime Minister, certainly. Keir Starmer's not saying anything today about the Brexit 5th anniversary. His spokesman has said the government's approach is working with the EU to strengthen our ties of security and defence, improve the relationship of trade and investment, and work with the EU to identify areas of national interest. And so it goes on. Are you embarrassed by the anniversary? His spokesman was asked. Our focus is on the future, they say. The PM is focused on resetting relations with Europe. We'll see that as soon as Monday he's going to go to meet the EU 27 leaders and speak to them, the first time a PM has done that since Brexit Day. So you might argue you're looking there at his priorities, not looking backwards at the vote and the leaving of the EU 5 years ago, but looking forwards into where he wants to take this country. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, she has issued a statement and talked on camera about Brexit, and here's what she had to say.
5 years ago, we had what was the greatest vote of confidence in our country. And as Brexit Secretary, I removed lots of EU regulations. I ended the supremacy of the European Court of Justice. But there's still a lot more to do, like a trade deal with the US. That's a Brexit opportunity that we need to take. We started those negotiations when President Trump was last in power. He is back again. The Biden administration didn't want it. I think Keir Starmer needs to look at that, look at where the opportunities are. That's where the growth is going to be.
Kevin Bennett there on a farm speaking to reporters earlier. We're waiting for Sir Ed Davey. He's a Lib Dem leader. He'll probably say, let's get back into customs union or single market, one of those two institutions that Labour say they won't do. Those are the two areas they won't do, and also no freedom of movement. That's their triple lock on their Brexit plans, if you like. But how far we go towards that, we'll wait and see. And just to say, we are hearing from Nigel Farage, of course, Mr Brexit to many people. He created the weather which forced the referendum nearly a decade ago, which forced us to leave. He's speaking at a rally in that woman there, Kemi Badenoch's seat, later today. A real kind of hostile, aggressive
quite
act.
vicious, this.
Yeah, and that comes interesting as the Tories, according to a poll this lunchtime from Techney, the Tories are now third place in this polling.
Is that the second or third pollster that now puts the Conservative Party in third place?
I think the third one,
yeah.
Tom. I think find out now, certainly. And there's one more, wasn't there? I name it now. But yeah,
I think it's the third. We'll go with the third.
We'll go with the third. We'll actually, do you know
We'll
what?
fact check that for you.
We can fact check this right now.
They are soaring ahead in the polls, and momentum is with them. The one from Find Out Now yesterday, as we said, gave a 4-point lead for Reform UK over Labour. That's bigger than the margin of error, which is 2 or 3%.
This trip to Kemi Badenoch's constituency is, yes, it's quite fun tactic.
It's going to be.
He's going to get all the Reform members in the area together, isn't he? He's going to say, look, we have more members than you, because this is all. He's threatened this, didn't he?
That's right.
Over the membership ticker.
So over a month ago, we saw that tweet, didn't we, from Kemi Badenoch saying that she questioned the numbers claimed by Reform UK as members. I should say members. It's still a company, by the way, formally. You're not a member in the same way other parties are, but we are told...
a registered supporter.
Yes, and we are told that the company is becoming a party by Farage and also the chairman's ear, Yousaf, shortly.
Now, I should say we were wrong. We were all wrong. It's not 2 pollsters. It's not 3 pollsters.
You love this, don't you?
It's 7 pollsters.
7 pollsters.
Techne, Find Out Now, Salvation, YouGov, More in Common, Opinion and Whitestone Insight have all put the Tories in third place this week.
And that's a worry.
Extraordinary.
And that's a worry, and I think they keep apparently grabbing defeat out the jaws of victory, this party.
Every poll released this week.
If you look at Priti Patel's remarks yesterday on net migration, that's a worry. But anyway, we'll see you later. You'll be live on the channel, won't you?
We will.
For the Farage speech.
Yes, so that'll be very, very interesting to see. I mean, he's got a unique sort of perspective on this, because whilst he put forward the idea that, we should leave the European Union, push the government, force them to have that referendum, he says it hasn't gone particularly well.
No. I mean, I think the idea of Brexit is a noble idea, badly implemented by politicians. It's not Brexit's fault it's gone wrong, I would argue. It's the politicians.
I find it so funny that Nigel Farage is heading up to Kemi Badenoch's constituency to cause some trouble.
Well, she's only got a slim majority. It's only 3,000 or 4,000.
Yeah, Saffron Walden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's quite a big majority for some of the Conservative seats, Conservative-held seats.
What a time we live.
Anyway, of course, Scotland was the most pro-EU part of the UK. So let's turn to our reporter, Tony Maguire, who's in Edinburgh, where over 74% of residents voted to remain in the EU referendum. Tony, have they suddenly changed their minds?
No, I don't quite think so. But, I think that the debate has changed. Conversation has certainly moved on. It had to, as you say, back in 2016, all 32 of Scotland's councils voted unanimously to stay with the EU. And then, of course, Brexit happened on a UK-wide level and we left. But, I think that word unanimous is used quite liberally, I think, by the Remain camp. When, in reality, 62% of the country, they voted to remain. But, 38% is still a sizable amount. That's essentially 2/5 of the country wanted to see Brexit happen. And as you said, here in Edinburgh, 74.4%, almost 3/4 of the population wanted to keep that relationship going. A lot of people in Scotland, before we left the EU, 220,000 EU nationals who lived here temporarily, who went on to seek, many of them, went on to seek residential status. But a lot of them, remember, in 2016, they put their vote in after 2 years later, after voting no in the independence referendum. They wanted to protect their freedom of movement. But alas, obviously for them, well, they had to make other plans. Now, I think it's also worth saying that a lot of people here in Edinburgh actually obviously did support Brexit. And I managed to find a couple of them today who had their comments about why Brexit hasn't quite worked out for them.
Everything's in chaos, and Brexit's not been allowed to be delivered. It would have been a lot better, without any doubt, getting back without being with the European Unions. But if Brexit was allowed to be carried out, it's been sabotaged, it was a non-starter.
What are the benefits is my question. We now have a lack of workers in the most essential fields that we need, like in shops or in hospitals, things like that. And what exactly are we benefiting from this, apart from rising costs in food?
The Brexiteers were quite right, and it was a democratic vote. Too many people are trying to change it.
Trying to stop it?
Yeah.
Sore losers?
I would say so, aye.
Your opinion of watching Britain go through Brexit?
Well, I think they should have never done that.
Do you think EU is weaker without Britain?
I think the EU is stronger with Britain, yes.
Yeah.
But I think for students it was a bad point because they like to do Erasmus and come here and it was easier, or even for us to travel it was easier.
It might not be the most appetising point of view, but, you know, whatever way you look at it, our tourism sector, our hospitality, and of course our beloved whisky sector are all struggling as a result of Brexit. But, you know, as a true British point of view, you know, we look at the hand that we're dealt, and one way or another, we hope that in the future, relations will be much better and more profitable for all of us here in Britain.
Well, Tony, thank you very much. From a very picturesque Edinburgh. I do love it when you pick the most wonderful and beautiful parts of the country to stand in front of. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, the bagpipes.
Yeah, no, it's a picture-perfect, audio-perfect report.
Well, meanwhile, the government has published its Borders Bill. Will it be perfect? It's designed to smash the gangs and clamp down on illegal migration.
Well, here with us to discuss it is the former Conservative MP, Jonathan Gullis. Now, Jonathan, one of the strange things about this bill that the government is calling the Border Security Bill is that it actually repeals a lot of a bill that you voted for that was passed that became the Illegal Migration Act.
Well, like you say, Tom, it's just causing mass confusion yet again in the system. Ultimately, let's be perfectly frank, I think you've done actually yourself some very good tweets summarising what's going on. Number one, we've now effectively reintroduced a path towards citizenship for those people who arrive illegally in the country. We're now removing as well the scientific ability to actually determine whether someone is indeed a child, which of course many people claim to be. And then on the other side of things as well, we've got this fact that you can no longer remove people to a country of origin or a safe third country. So any deterrent is now being removed. And our whole hope is on that we will be able to smash the gangs. Well, I think the public have heard enough of the rhetoric. I sadly think the proof will be in the pudding, and the pudding will be that more people needlessly risk across the English Channel, therefore mean we'll see more death in the Channel, we'll see more people arriving on our shores, and the smugglers already know there's a 66% success rate when it comes to approving people to stay indefinitely. That will now rocket up even further when they are told that they can actually tell people, if you come to the UK, there is a route, there is a way to citizenship, so don't worry, get on the boat, risk your life, and you'll be calling your UK home soon.
Jonathan, I will come back to this, but I just want to ask you, because we've been talking quite a bit about the Boris wave of immigration, you know, sort of bringing in sort of millions of people and the potential cost that will bring to our country in the years to come. Do you think the Conservatives have done enough to sort of apologise for that? Because there's a bit of an excruciating interview with the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, where she sort of refused to apologise and said it was sort of the right thing to do at the time. But there's a palpable anger out there.
I think you know, Emily, you've probably heard me many times before say, no, I don't think we've been apologetic enough. I think we're going to have to spend 2025 continuing to apologise before people are willing to even listen to any ideas or proposals that we put forward, and then to try and win credibility is an even tougher challenge in that regard. I think it's well known I was one of the most vocal voices on the backbenches of the Conservative Party when it came to both illegal and legal migration, and obviously worked with existing colleagues like Danny Kruger to write a paper with suggestions some of which were adopted just to get us back to the 200,000 figure. But that isn't good enough still. And I think we have to face up to reality that the Conservative Party has got a long way to go to rebuild its reputation. And I have said it before, and I get told by some former colleagues I'm being OTT with this, but I really do think we're in a perilous position. I think the fact that, as Tom pointed out, 7 opinion pollsters have Reform ahead of us now, I suspected that would be the case in the early days, and Kemi does need time. But if we seem to think stupidly that these local elections are going to go good for us because people don't like Labour, we're kidding ourselves. The public still hate us. Then in 2026, we could see us become one of the 4th or 5th largest party in Wales when Reform become maybe the official opposition, even, God forbid, the governing party of Wales. They might get 6, 7 MSPs. They'll have a mayor in Dame Andrea Jenkins. They'll have 300 to 500 councillors. And the pressure that's going to put on the Conservative Party to either merger, which means the death of the Conservative Party as we know it, or try and come to some deal, which will mean the end of conservatism in some parts of the country, is going to be palpable. So it's a humongous task that's ahead of Kemi. And I don't think enough Conservative parliamentarians are fully aware that we've still got 2 years of pain to go through. And if they're not aware of it, then God almighty, they're going to have a hell of a shock in a couple of years' time.
Of course, you were a member of Parliament through not 1, but 2 defenestrations of Conservative leaders in the last Parliament. We all know how, well, choppy and changey the Conservative Party could be. Do you foresee a situation, if things continue to go south for the Conservative Party, where there could be another leadership challenge?
Personally, Tom, I dread the idea of that happening, because if we had another leadership challenge, we just continue to look like we're inward-looking, inward-fighting, and not trying to have an outward-looking proposal. And I think Kemi Badenoch actually is someone that, as someone who would be deemed to be on the right of the Conservative Party, I'll just say I'm a Conservative in the Conservative Party. I think that is someone who actually understands kind of those core issues, and I think she does have some really good characteristics, one being in particular that she is very strong, very determined, and willing to speak her mind. And I think the public want a strong leader, whether that be a strong man or a strong woman. They want to see that. And if we end up, and that's why I'm worried about reality not hitting with Conservative MPs at this moment in time, because if they're not mentally prepared still for the pain that's still yet to come, because they seem to think we've hit the floor, things can always get worse as well as getting better. If they're not mentally prepared for that reality, then of course they'll panic, and then God forbid we'll end up in another leadership fiasco, and no one really wants to see that. So I hope that Kemi's given the time. I hope she does come up with robust policies. The biggest challenge is trying to win credibility. Now, how that's done, to be honest with you, I'm not even sure how we win that back. I think it's going to have to be doing things like Kemi did with the schools bill, where you find a hole in Labour's bill, as she did over the fact that there's going to be a cap on teacher pay, press that saw over and over again and force the government into a U-turn. That's how we can demonstrate credibility and responsibility and know-how to deliver, unlike our opponents in Reform who can talk the talk, but governing is very different to being in opposition.
Yeah, she has been quite good at that, to be fair, sort of pushing the button on a particular policy. Whether it's always the most sort of, headline-making area that she goes on at PMQs, it does show that she's interested in the detail. Jonathan Gullis, thank you very much indeed, former Conservative MP. Great to have you on, as always.
Interesting to note that a lot of people think 20% is the floor for the Conservative Party. It's not. The Conservatives went down to 9% in the European elections in 2019 under Theresa May. 9%. Well, there's always further to go, isn't there?
Pretty bad.
This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. Indeed, the government has pledged to invest an extra £100 million of funding for neighbourhood policing. Will this really get more boots on the ground? Don't go anywhere.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Jonathan, in London, we're hearing that there could be more posties from an Amazon point of view in order to limit or cut carbon emissions, but that they could put more people on foot delivering their parcels.
This is really interesting because more and more people now obviously are using Amazon and buying their shopping online or buying gifts online. And it's interesting that in London they're talking about putting their Amazon workers on foot. There are now parts of the country, I think Milton Keynes is one part of the country, where there's robots delivering parcels, or you'll see these. Well, they call them robots. You'll see these little things sort of bundling down the street.
Yes.
Sort of
robots.
Yeah, I mean, technically they're a robot, but when I think of a robot, I think of a sort of
a humanoid robot.
Yeah, sort of humanoid thing, sort of Lost in Space style robot. But actually, they're sort of little sort of carriages, little
droids,
boxes.
like Star Wars droid type.
Well, they're not
thing.
even that. They're like a little sort of like a box on wheels, delivering parcels in places like Milton Keynes and other bits of the country. So I think this is just another example of how the world is changing. Online shopping is completely changing the way in which we all live our lives, the way things.
But I think Milton Keynes lends itself to something like that. This is a newly designed town.
Yeah. Exactly, that's why they're in Milton Keynes.
And I really do think that a town like that really does lend itself towards a piece of tech like that. When I think back, our postie in Gloucestershire is a guy called Dave. He's fantastic. Everyone knows who he is. But I'm not sure that he could be replaced by one of these little droid things.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past 2. Now, the government has pledged to invest an extra £100 million of funding for neighbourhood policing in England and Wales, all as it seeks to boost the number of officers on the ground. It's in addition to the £100 million announced in December in an effort to put 13,000 more police officers on the streets by 2029. This is one of the government's central pledges. The investment is scheduled for the next financial year, and each police force will set out plans to use it to increase patrols by early spring. Here with more is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, will this make a difference?
Well, the government hopes it will make some difference. It comes as the government also announces that the financial settlement for the next year is £17.5 billion, which is a £1.1 billion increase on the previous settlement. But the fact is, police forces say they have suffered for decades of underfunding, and there are real structural issues there as well. That means they're having and have had to take money from the reserves just to stay doing the kind of policing roles that they're supposed to do, that the public expect. But many forces, in particular Lincolnshire, which says it's got a £14 million funding gap, is talking about 200 officer posts that they're going to have to axe. Essex Police also a £5 million funding gap. They're talking about a freeze on all of the PCSOs that it employs. It's around about 100 of those. And those roles are important because these police community support officers are the officers that are in neighbourhoods, and this extra money is meant to try to guarantee that there is a boost in neighbourhood policing, because there is understandable concern right across the country at the way in which certain crimes like shoplifting, for instance, have not been tackled by police forces in recent years. Police forces are getting the message. They are doing that increasingly. We can show you a clip, actually, of an operation that took place on Monday at a co-op in South London. A persistent thief who was in there ransacking the meat counter in this store. The police waited in a back room, watched CCTV when he was on. When he was in and then starting to ransack the meat counter, they got him. Let's take a look at that arrest.
You're naked! Give me your hands!
That is satisfying, Mark. The number of videos I've seen online of miscreants, no, worse than miscreants, subhuman individuals just swipe shelves and walk out scot-free. I mean, it's remarkable, actually, that seeing some proper policing being done is frankly newsworthy.
Yeah, the look on this man's face is priceless. He's shocked because for days he was going into that store every day and just ransacking that meat counter with no repercussions whatsoever. The police, they looked at the intelligence that they had around this crime. They decided it was worth investing in getting some officers there just to get into that back room to look at the CCTV. When they saw him, they were right out there and they jumped on this individual. And in fact, police in Lambeth, the borough in South London where this arrest took place, say that they have upped their operations against this kind of shoplifting, and they say 11 of the 14 most prolific shoplifters in that borough are now behind bars, as is this man who goes by the name of Derek Bell, 36-year-old, now in jail, jailed for 2 months. OK, he'll be out in a month, but it's still at least some kind of a repercussion and penalty for the offences that he was getting away with scot-free.
Only 2 months, though. If it was up to me, it would be a bit longer, Mark. But as you say, lots of different police forces now getting extra money for extra patrols. Will it fill the gaps that you were previously talking about? A lot of these police services running in deficit anyway. I mean, is it just going to keep them afloat? Is it actually going to put more bobbies on the beat?
Well, it's ring-fenced, so yes, it should go towards neighbourhood policing, but in effect, what it will allow chief constables to do is to concentrate on the neighbourhood policing elements and maybe to boost that, but they've still then got very tough decisions to make elsewhere within their forces, and that can be decisions like trying to reduce the number of staff, vehicle replacements that are not replaced as soon as they should be replaced, which means, of course, they're then prone to potentially mechanical issues. And in some cases, it will actually mean a recruitment freeze. So the increase that we saw eventually under the Conservatives, so some 20,000 additional police officers towards the end of the Conservative government, some of that at the moment is being reversed.
Well, Mark White, thanks very much for bringing us that latest and that incredibly satisfying video. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more to come on today's programme. Indeed, the Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, he's set to reveal that more than 10% of farmland in England will be sacrificed to help the government achieve its net zero targets. We'll be joined by a farmer live after your latest headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. A woman's body has been found near where two missing sisters were last seen in Aberdeen. Henrietta and Eliza Husty from a set of triplets were last spotted near the River Dee in Aberdeen on January the 7th at 2 a.m. Police Scotland says, while the body hasn't been formally identified, Henrietta's family have been informed and the search for Eliza continues. They added there are no apparent suspicious circumstances. The disappearance of the sisters, who are originally from Hungary, led to a huge missing persons search earlier this month. 3 judges who oversaw court proceedings involving Sarah Sharif in the years before she was murdered can be named for the first time. Judges Alison Rayside, Peter Nathan and Sally Williams were all involved in family court hearings related to the 10-year-old between 2013 and 2019. The last of the 3 sets of proceedings saw Sarah placed in the home of her father, Irfan Sharif, and her stepmother, Baynash Batul. They were jailed for life last year for her murder in 2023. Efforts to recover the bodies of those who died in yesterday's air crash near Washington, D.C. are resuming after being paused because of difficult conditions overnight. And some live pictures here from Washington, D.C. for those of you watching on television. 40 bodies have now been found, which leaves 27 people unaccounted for. Tests are being carried out on the black boxes recovered from the passenger plane which collided with the US Army helicopter yesterday. 67 people died. Officials in Washington say they are going to attempt to salvage the wreckage of both aircraft later today. And if you're thinking about stocking up your wine cellar, well, the advice is to get on with it because prices rise tomorrow. Alcohol tax itself goes up by 3.6%. That's in line with RPI. But there's a new tax on wine and spirits too. That's based on strength, and that comes in at the same time. So tax on a bottle of gin, the duty, I should say, on a bottle of gin rises by 32 pence. Wine at 14.5% ABV will go up by 54p. However, there is some relief to beer drinkers anyway, or cider drinkers. Duty on pints pulled in pubs will be cut by 1.7%, meaning a saving of a penny. That is it for the moment. More from the GB Newsroom coming up for you throughout the afternoon and evening.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We'll see rain easing across the southeast this morning, leaving a largely cloudy day for most, though it should start to brighten up across the west. Where we see the thickest cloud, that's where we see this frontal feature just draped across the country, but behind this a ridge of high pressure, bringing in largely settled and dry conditions. So a damp start across the southeast, as I say, though rain largely easing, and it leaves a mostly cloudy day across much of the country, and we could still see some drizzly patches, mainly around hilly areas, but sunshine breaking through nicely across southern parts of Wales, Devon and Cornwall, also across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, where we'll see the best of the brightness, and temperatures around about average for this time of the year. To finish off the day then, across Scotland, we'll see a mix, still plenty of cloud around, still some drizzly spots around hilly areas, but some clearer spells out to the southwest, starting to turn rather breezy here though as we head into this evening. Similar across Northern Ireland, plenty of clear spells, so turning chilly as we head into the evening, but starting to turn rather breezy across the west. Chilly once again across Wales and parts of the southwest where we see the clearest skies, but across central and southeastern parts that cloud sticks around through much of the evening and into the overnight period, so it could turn rather murky by the morning, perhaps even seeing some patchy fog. But once again, where we see those clear spells, turning frosty here, so a chilly start as we start the weekend. A change on its way though across the southwest, clouds spilling in here, perhaps even seeing some drizzle across western parts of Scotland by the morning. So temperatures just dipping just below zero where we see the clearest skies in the west, and this area once again through the central slice of the UK is where we're going to see the best of the brightness, but once again quite a grey and murky day across parts of the southeast, and winds picking up nicely across western parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland too, likely seeing cloudy conditions here, also with some rain and drizzle. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Perth and Kinross, the A989 is closed each way along Tay Street in Perth because of flooding. There are a number of cancelled ScotRail train services into and out of Edinburgh Waverley through Daubney because of a faulty rail. In County Down, the A51 remains closed each way along Canterbury Road in Guildford because of a fallen tree. In West Yorkshire, Sprockhovel Way is closed off the A638 between North Elmsall and Hemsworth after a car overturned. On the M1 in Derbyshire, the southbound entry slip roads closed at junction 25 for the A52 because of emergency repairs. In Gloucestershire, the A466 remains closed each way at Llandogo after the storms last week. No trains running at Cardiff Queen Street because of engineering works, and Gatwick Express services remain suspended between Gatwick Airport and Brighton after a landslip. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is coming up to 20 to 3, and the Environment Secretary Steve Reed is set to reveal that more than 10% of farmland in England will be sacrificed in order to help the government achieve its net zero targets. Well, swathes of the countryside will be switched to solar farms, tree planting and improving habitats for birds, insects and fish. The move will likely put the government on a fresh collision course with farmers who are already angry at Minister's plans to introduce a family farm tax rate on that farmland. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the farmer James Wright. James, thanks for joining us. Are you looking forward to giving up 10% of your farm?
Well, the sun is shining today in North Devon. I should be looking forward to spring and feeling happy. And instead, Steve Reed's come along and not only ruined my week, but probably ruined my future here for the second time in as many months.
I mean, this is a fairly extraordinary story. What is behind this drive, and how will it personally affect you?
Well, so they've announced today something very complicated. It sounds like jargon. It's the land use framework. And what this is an advisory document for government for how they'll make future decisions. It's how councils will judge whether or not they can turn land into houses or whatever. And in that document, it says 9% is going to be turned over for nature restoration, but also a further 9% is going to be degraded for food production to improve sort of things like tree planting. We'll do agroforestry. And for a farmer like me, I'm a grassland farmer, and on their little graph that they've published, it's farms like me that are going to be the ones that are going to be told to stop farming. The arable farms, they'll carry on, but it's the livestock farmers whose cows produce the poo that feeds the bees are the ones that are going to struggle. And Steve Reed's visited one farm since July when he was elected, and it's probably because he doesn't realise that.
That's a pretty extraordinary statistic. I mean, how do you feel about a agricultural secretary who comes... Well, he represents a constituency in Croydon. I mean, he's quite an urban rural secretary, if that makes sense. And, of course, the farming minister, Daniel Zeichner, he's the Member of Parliament for Cambridge, another city. Yeah. I mean, is there anyone in the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs who actually represents a rural area?
Well, look, City Steve hasn't got a single farm in his constituency. He doesn't even have a city farm or something like that.
Even I've got a city farm in my constituency.
Well, exactly. You know, at least someone's got someone somewhere. But no, Steve doesn't. He's a close ally of Keir Starmer, and he's basically just taking the kicking. What we need is a minister who's going to stand up to the vested interests in this world that want to make sure that farming carries the can for every ill and woe. And that's not what we've got. And this is just yet another death knell, another nail in the coffin for British farming. And it's not like people are going to eat 18% less food. That's going to be 18% more food that we're importing, which just means we're damaging the environment somewhere else. Why don't we support farmers here producing great British food to great standards rather than importing it? And that is the question that I just cannot get my head around.
What the government might say is that, of course, they're protecting the highest quality agricultural land. We know that farming efficiency has improved year on year, decade on decade. We could be producing more food on less land if we just really focus in on that highest quality land. And it could be that actually we produce more food on less land. What do you say to that claim?
Yes, exactly, Tom. But then why have they introduced the family farm tax, which penalises the largest, most profitable, the most food-producing farmers? If that's the government's aim, we should scrap the family farm tax, and then we can have this conversation. But the problem is they're trying to move on from already giving us a bad deal. I mean, Steve Reed talked at the beginning of the month about a new deal for farmers. Well, he needs to sort the old one out first. He can't move on from the family farm tax until he's done that, because it's the largest farmers who'll pay the most. They're the ones who can least afford to pay it.
It does seem that it really has been blow after blow after blow for the farming community from the government. I mean, how really can any farmer plan for the future if at any large announcement from this government it seems like there's going to be perhaps another wallop coming?
Well, so behind me, I've got 30 heifers. They're 2 years old, and they're going to give me my first calf this year, and I can't sell that calf for 18 months. So it takes 36 months, 3 years from an animal being born to becoming a profit revenue-producing animal. And there'll be farmers up and down the country this spring, making decisions about what their future of their farm is. And beef, in particular, it's already down 5% over the last couple of years, and the national herd is shrinking. We are at a tipping point, and Labour have got to get this right, and right now they're not. And the sun is shining. You know, we should be happy, but at the moment we're all very, very worried.
Oh, well, James, right, we're going to keep tabs on this one. Thanks so much for joining us and letting us know frankly, the plight of so many farmers under this government. Thanks for joining us. Well, elsewhere, today marks the 5th anniversary of Brexit. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, well, he's been reflecting. He was asked whether the UK should join the EU customs union. Remember, that would mean the UK not able to sign trade deals independently of the EU trade policy. Here's what he said.
Liberal Democrats are going to lead the debate in Britain to have a closer relationship with our European colleagues. It's good for our trade, our economy, it's good for our defence and our security. And a customs union, which I've called for, the Liberal Democrats are championing, would be great for growth, far better than anything the government has announced to date. We need to get rid of those trade barriers that the Conservatives put up that have so hit our small and medium-sized business, our exporters. That's the way to grow our economy, by having that closer relationship with Europe.
Interesting stuff. I wonder whether the Scotch whisky distilleries will be particularly happy about policy subcontracting tariff policy to the European Union, given the looming trade war with the United States. Who knows? But if you're in search of some European, not tariffs, but sun, here's your forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Often breezy across the Canary Islands and heavy showers in Tunisia and Algeria, but elsewhere it is going to be largely settled, particularly across Greece and Italy. Plenty of sunny spells here, but as we move our way westwards towards the Mediterranean, this is where we're going to find the heavy showers. These could be thundery at times. And then out to the west, high pressure largely dominating, but it is going to bring some strong winds at times across Madeira and also Tenerife, where the best of the temperatures are, and elsewhere it is going to be largely settled into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come on the show. Indeed, Dry January ends tonight, just as the Six Nations begins. I'll be raising a glass with a publican after this.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
First, mate, we had lockdowns. Then we had soaring energy costs. Then we had a hike in national insurance for employers. Then we had soaring wage costs. And now the government expects people like you to monitor what people say in boozers. And if you don't, you might get sued. I bet you feel like saying cheers to them, don't you?
Look, it just looks like another war on pubs, you know. Remember, they tried to stop smoking outside as well. Luckily, they rethought that. But look, we've got everything stacked against us, Martin, and the last thing I need to do is go and get in people's conversations. At the end of the day, a pub is like an extension to your home. You know, it's a public house. Friends go to speak. Friends go to meet, unwind after work. It's none of my business what you're talking about. Any good publican, and myself included, anyone that was rude to anyone or on purpose, they want to offend people or they want to dig people out, antagonise them, of course I'm going to step in and say, behave yourself or you go. But look, how can I be on social media talking about everything, transgender, immigration, and people not be allowed to do that at the bar or do that at the table of a pub? It's ridiculous. And these ministers really do need to sort of look at this legislation and see where it could lead, because I'm not going to stop anyone speaking in my pub. Again, if they're trying to antagonise people or they're rude or trying to start trouble, they get thrown out the front door, and any publican worth their salt is going to do that as well. But we're not there to police people's conversations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It has just gone 10 to 3, and it's good news for boozers. Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Dry January finally draws to a close at midnight tonight, making way for the largest international rugby union tournament in the Northern Hemisphere. Yes, of course, the Six Nations Rugby Championship kicks off in Paris tonight, made up of Italy, Wales, England, France, Scotland and Ireland. Is the lure of a bitter pint or two while watching the game enough to pull the punters back into their locals this weekend? Well, who better to ask than the owner of the Criterion St Andrews, Steve Latto. Steve, has Dry January been a tough month for publicans like yourself?
It's been a very long month. It feels like it's been the longest January in my 14 years. They think with the weather, with the cost of living crisis, everything has just combined to make it a truly long month, and we're so glad that it's almost over, and particularly that the Six Nations is back on as well, which is obviously on terrestrial TV as well, which helps pubs like ours that don't have satellite TV.
Now, this, of course, has been a sort of tradition, well, for the best part of the last decade or so, that people drink less or drink nothing at all in the month of January. Have you had to change what sort of drinks you have on offer to respond to it? I mean, have you been selling the zeros, the zero drinks in the last 31 days?
Absolutely. Our top-selling packaged products, so in a can or a bottle, have all been non-alcoholic products. It's been quite phenomenal. I think with the quality that the zero market has now compared to what it was before has helped us greatly. The other big thing is if you do food, the food side of it's been pretty steady, but certainly you do see that big fall off of the alcohol sales going down. Tea and coffee are still pretty stable, but the 0% packaged products, whether it's lager, stouts, or the cocktails, they do help us in the January months.
Yeah, I have to say, it does seem that the zero drinks have improved in terms of their taste a lot in the last couple of years. But my goodness me, let's hope that the Six Nations does bring people back to the pub, because it's been a very tough, well, not even month, it's been a tough 5 years for you guys.
Yeah, we really need this to bolster us coming into April with the national insurance changes that are happening in April. It's going to hit a lot of places very hard at that time, so a good start to the year is key for a lot of places to stay open. The Six Nations is a phenomenal tournament and always brings a lot of people in to watch, and Scotland have got a great chance this year, so you never know. We might be there at the end.
Well, as someone with both Welsh and English heritage, I can't wish you guys the best of luck, but I hope it will be a fantastic Six Nations this time round. Thanks so much for joining us, Steve Latto, the owner of the Criterion in St Andrews. Well, thanks for watching Good Afternoon Britain, but do not move a muscle, because live from Boston, Lincolnshire, it's the one and only Martin Daubney. He's up next.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head towards the weekend, it's often going to be rather wet and windy to the northwest, largely dry elsewhere, and we could even see some sunshine in some spots. But to end on Friday, we have this frontal system. It's largely fizzling out, but it's bringing a large area of cloud, a slight brief ridge of high pressure building behind it, and that's where we're going to see the clearest skies overnight. So turning chillier here, maybe even some patchy frost as we head into the overnight period. But for parts of the east, that cloud sticking around, largely murky by the morning, perhaps even seeing some hill fog too. And then a change on its way, clouds spilling into the northwest, perhaps with some outbreaks of rain towards western parts of Scotland towards the morning. Temperatures largely staying above freezing under cloudier skies, but as I say, could see some frost develop where we see the clear spells. So to start the weekend across Scotland on Saturday, some clearer skies just to the northeast. That's where we're likely to see some frosty conditions, but further south, a fair amount of clouds. Starting to turn rather windy across western parts of Scotland, around coasts of Northern Ireland too, where we'll start to see that cloud and those outbreaks of rain spill in. A few more clearer spells across Wales, parts of the southwest. Once again, a frosty and cold start here, but for much of the country, plenty of cloud around to start the day. Now, the good news is the clouds should break up fairly nicely. That's going to allow for some sunshine, particularly across northern parts of England. Parts of Wales and the southwest should start to see some sunny spells, perhaps even later across the very far southeast. But once again across central and parts of the south, another cloudy day on offer. And winds really starting to pick up across the far northwest, a risk of some gales to the very far northwest of Scotland by Saturday afternoon. And it's here once again where we'll continue to see that cloud, this frontal system waiting in the winds, gradually moving its way eastwards and still very windy under the rain too. And heading into next week, it's often going to be wet and windy across parts of the northwest. Best of the brightness across the southeast. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens.